Okay, so get ready, because we're diving into some seriously interesting stuff you guys sent in about Lake Mead. Um, like what's coming up as the water level drops.
Yeah, it's a kind of double whammy, isn't it? You get a look at climate change and then you get this like mystery and true crime aspect to it.
Exactly. Like we're seeing a drought and it's like historically severe and it's uncovering these like unsettling discoveries. Since May 2022, 4 sets of human remains have been found. So it's more than a coincidence.
Oh yeah, definitely. And this isn't just any location either. Lake Mead is huge. It's like a key water source for millions of people. So it's understandable that these discoveries have gotten so much attention.
Absolutely. So let's start with the case that's really captured the public imagination. The Hemenway Harbor doe. Found in a barrel, evidence of a gunshot wound. It feels like something straight out of a movie.
Yeah, it really does. And then you add in the fact that investigators have narrowed down the time of death, somewhere between the mid-1970s and the early 1980s. It just adds another layer to it.
Yeah, it's like this discovery has thrown open a door to like a very specific chapter in Las Vegas history,
Right.
like back when the mob's presence was undeniable.
Exactly. Las Vegas in the 70s and 80s, it was like a hotbed of organized crime. They were involved in everything, from casinos to unions and unfortunately violence.
So this body in a barrel, are we looking at a mob hit?
It's a strong possibility. Lake Mead was just a short drive from the Strip. So it would have been a convenient place to get rid of someone you wanted to disappear. And the method, the gunshot and the barrel, that lines up with what we know about mob activity during that period.
So how did the mob operate back then? What made them so powerful? And what kind of crimes were they involved in?
Well, their power was built on control. They controlled the casinos, the unions. They even had influence over some politicians. This gave them a lot of leverage, and they weren't afraid to use violence to maintain that control. We're talking gambling, extortion, racketeering, even assassinations.
Wow. So if this was a mob hit, how are investigators approaching the case now?
Very seriously. They are working to extract DNA from the remains, and the FBI is involved, which suggests they're looking into potential connections to known mob figures from that era. It's a long shot, given how much time has passed. But you know, forensic technology has advanced so much, there's always a chance they might find a match or uncover new leads.
It makes you wonder if there are like records hidden away somewhere
Mm-hmm.
that could shed light on what happened, or even someone who's been carrying this secret all these years.
Absolutely. And you know, this case is especially intriguing because it's tied to a very specific place and time. Las Vegas has always had this kind of mysterious aura, and this just adds another layer to that.
Speaking of other layers, what about the other remains that have been found? Do they fit into this mob narrative as well?
Not necessarily. Two of the other cases involve skeletal remains, which means they've been submerged for much longer. These could be from drownings or accidents. That happened long before the mob was running things in Vegas.
So how do investigators figure out the difference, like between an accidental drowning and something more sinister, like a mob hit?
Well, it's a combination of things. The condition of the remains, the location, and any objects found with the body. Like in the case of the Hemenway Harbor doe. The barrel and the gunshot wound are pretty clear indicators of foul play. But with skeletal remains, it can be a lot harder to determine the cause of death.
So in those cases, it becomes more of a puzzle, trying to put together the limited evidence they have.
Exactly. And that's where forensic science and historical context come in. Investigators have to analyze the remains, look for any signs of trauma, and then try to place them within the historical timeline of the area. It's like putting together a jigsaw puzzle, but with much higher stakes.
This is fascinating, but it's also kind of creepy. Like it makes you wonder how many more secrets are submerged beneath the surface.
And that's a question that's going to keep coming up, literally, as the water level continues to drop.
So are we saying this is just the tip of the iceberg?
Mm.
Like as Lake Mead shrinks, are we going to keep finding more remains?
It's a very real possibility. Researchers are predicting that the lake will continue to recede, which means potentially exposing even more of its history. It's a grim prediction, but it's one that we need to be prepared for.
It's almost as if this drought is peeling back layers of time, revealing this past that we thought was buried forever. And it makes you wonder what else is down there, just waiting to be discovered.
That's a question we'll explore further as we go. There's still a lot to unpack here, both in terms of the specific cases and the bigger implications for the region.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that a place we associate with like fun and recreation could also hold these like dark secrets. People go to Lake Mead to boat and fish and just enjoy the scenery. It's hard to picture that same place as like a potential graveyard.
It is a jarring contrast for sure. And it's a reminder that beneath the surface of what we see, there's often a much deeper and more complex story. It's like those sunken boats and lost towns you mentioned earlier. They represent another part of Lake Mead's hidden history.
Right. Like it's not just human remains. As the water goes down, we're
Mhm.
seeing all these like remnants of the past emerging. It's like the lake itself is becoming an archaeological dig.
It is, in a sense. You have the old St. Thomas, Nevada, which was flooded when they built the Hoover Dam. And now parts of it are resurfacing, these ghost towns that were once bustling communities before the lake swallowed them up.
That's fascinating. But also kind of sad. Like these were people's homes, their lives. To see them resurface like this, it's like a tangible reminder of the sacrifices that were made to create this reservoir.
Yeah, and it raises all these questions about how we deal with the past. Do we try to preserve these newly exposed pieces of history? Or what about the potential for looting or damage to these sites? It's this delicate balance between scientific curiosity and the need to respect the past.
It's like the drought is forcing us to confront not just the environmental consequences, but these ethical and historical considerations as well.
Exactly. It's this multifaceted problem. And it's not limited to just Lake Mead. It's happening all over the world. Climate change is altering landscapes and revealing things that have been hidden for centuries. Glaciers are receding, permafrost is thawing, and with each shift, we're uncovering more pieces of our history.
It's like opening a time capsule, but on a global scale. And some of those discoveries are bound to be more unsettling than others. I keep thinking about the Hemingway Harbor Doe. It's such a personal story, a life cut short. And for decades, it was literally submerged beneath the surface.
Yeah, it's a tragic reminder of the human cost of both violence and environmental change. This person probably had a family, friends, a whole life that was disrupted, and for so long their story remained untold.
What are the chances of actually solving a case like that after so much time?
It's difficult but not impossible. DNA technology has come a long way, and even with degraded samples, there's a chance of finding a match or identifying relatives. Plus, there's always the chance that someone out there knows something, a piece of information that could break the case wide open.
And this case seems connected to the mob. A time and place shrouded in secrecy. It just adds to the intrigue, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The mob was notorious for their code of silence. But memories fade, allegiances shift, and sometimes the truth finds a way of coming out.
Okay, so we've talked about the mob, the sunken towns, and the archaeological significance. But what does all of this mean for the millions of people who rely on Lake Mead for water?
That's the crucial question, isn't it? This isn't just a fascinating story about the past. It's a really important issue with real-world consequences. The Colorado River, which feeds Lake Mead, is experiencing a historic drought.
So what does that mean for the lake? Is it going to keep shrinking?
That's the trajectory we're on, unfortunately. Climate change models are predicting that the Southwest is going to keep getting warmer and drier, which means less water flowing into the Colorado River and lower water levels in Lake Mead.
And that has huge implications for the region, right?
Yeah.
Las Vegas, Phoenix, Los Angeles, all these major cities rely on that water.
Absolutely. The dwindling water supply is putting a strain on everything. It's leading to increased water restrictions, higher costs, potential conflicts between states. All these communities are vying for their share of a shrinking pie. It's a situation that requires cooperation, innovation, and a fundamental shift in how we think about and manage our water.
So this has gone way beyond a true crime story. We're talking about the intersection of history, climate change, and the future of entire cities.
Precisely. And what's unfolding at Lake Mead is like a microcosm of what's happening all over the world. The choices we make today are going to have ripple effects for generations.
That's a powerful message. So where do we go from here? What can we learn from all of this? And what does it mean for the future?
Well, I think one of the most important things is the interconnectedness of it all. We can't separate the environmental from the social, or the historical from the present. Everything is linked. And we need to approach these issues holistically.
Yeah, it is overwhelming when you think about it. This web of interconnected issues. We started with a simple question about some discoveries at Lake Mead. And now we're talking about climate change, organized crime, the future of water resources.
It really shows you how even seemingly isolated events are often connected to these larger forces and trends. And those connections can be really insightful.
So if we look at the big picture, what's the most important thing for our listeners to take away from this?
I think it's the realization that the choices we make, both individually and collectively, have consequences. We see it with the mob's actions in the past and the repercussions that we're still dealing with today. We see it with how we've managed our water resources and the challenges that are coming up because of that.
Right? It's like that saying, we're not inheriting the earth from our ancestors, we're borrowing it from our children. But it feels like we're also uncovering some of the debts that were incurred along the way.
Exactly. And it's not about placing blame, it's about recognizing how complex these issues are and understanding that our actions have these ripple effects. Like the decisions made decades ago are the reason those bodies ended up in Lake Mead. And the decisions we make today will shape things, both literally and figuratively, for generations to come.
So what do you think is the most important thing we can learn from this?
For me, it's the power of perspective. When we look at Lake Mead, we can see it as a place of recreation, a source of water, a crime scene, an archaeological site, a symbol of environmental change. Each perspective shows us something different. And when we combine them all, that gives us the best understanding.
So we need to be willing to look at things from different angles, to consider all the layers of history, science, and human impact that come together in a place like Lake Mead.
Exactly. And that's something we can do with any issue. The more we understand the connections, the better we'll be at making informed decisions and creating a more sustainable future.
So to our listeners out there, the next time you hear about something in the news, or come across a complicated issue, take a step back. Ask yourself, what are the hidden connections? Yeah. What are the different perspectives? You might be surprised at what you discover.
Yeah, and remember, sometimes the most interesting discoveries are the ones we least expect, hidden just beneath the surface, waiting to be revealed, just like at Lake Mead. Who knows what other stories are waiting to be told?